In this video, we are going to be discussing the help and reference material available for the Fusion 360 API. So if you go up here in Fusion to the top right hand corner, down here, if you click this programming interface, that's going to open a web page here that is inside of the Fusion 360 help documentation, specifically for the programming interface. And there's going to be two main sections. This first section, these three topics are all over here onto the left hand side. And then there's another section on additional resources, which will take you to additional pages. So first, let's go over this. The user's manual contains high-level overviews of the API. If we go over here to the left and open this, there's several different topics, and a lot of them are step-by-step instructions on how to do things, like for example how to create a script. Other times it's just more of a in-depth description and overview of certain parts of the API. So as you're learning the API, to go through and read these would be extremely helpful. Let's go back to the main page. The next thing is the reference manual. And like it says here, the reference manual provides details about every object, method, property, event, and enum exposed by the API. So if you open up this, every single object has a topic here. It gives a description, gives the methods, the properties, tells you where it's accessed from. And then a lot of times there'll be sample codes as well, but here we can see return values, different parameters that are needed, some of the syntax for all three languages. And so the reference manual is extremely useful. In a later video on creating a sketch and circles, you'll see an example of how we go through into the reference manual and find the needed syntax and the needed parameters. So that's in a video to come. Then the last section is just code samples. So over here, there's code samples on a lot of different topics. So if we choose one, for example, modeling, how to create a circle in Sketch, it will give you a full code sample in all three languages. And not only does it give you code samples on how to do sketches and circles, it gives you a full code, so you can actually copy and paste that and run it from Spider. So the next section is these additional resources. If you go into, for example, this one, resource on GitHub, it will open a new page. This has some additional hour-long videos from Brian Eakins explaining the API. It also has links to more samples, a link to the forum and to the blog. The next thing is the Fusion Object Model. Again, we're going to have a more in-depth video on the Fusion Object Model. So if you go to the video about the document structure, that will talk a lot about the object model and how to navigate through this to access parts of the API. This here is basically a map of the Fusion 360 API, and you need to be able to scale or navigate through this in order to access different collections or different objects. So it's extremely useful to get to know this and know how to navigate it, but that will be discussed in depth in another video. So we also have a discussion group, and lastly we have Mod the Machine blog, and this will have several different topics and answers to questions, and as well as additional code and really cool topics. So that's a high-level overview of all of the reference material and help material. As you continue to watch the videos, you will see that we refer to these very often, and so it is useful to become familiar with all of this material.